The world stands at the edge of an abyss. 1.5 billion people already live in absolute poverty or are starving. Now it's not just these people's lives at stake. As the world's population spins out of control, the future of the planet itself is threatened. In 1950, it stood at 2.5 billion. Since then, it's more than doubled to 5.4 billion today. By 2025, the world's population will be 8.5 billion, and by 2050, 10.8 billion. The Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland was in London today to reconvene her Commission on the Environment, which will be making recommendations to the Rio Summit. The meeting was opened by Prince Charles, who voiced a concern, likely to be included in those recommendations, that population growth is not high enough on the agenda at Rio.
We will not protect the environment until we address the issues of population growth and poverty in the same breath. I do wish that these simple and incontestable truths could find greater prominence on the Rio agenda. Sadly, it seems that certain delegations are determined to prevent discussion of population growth. In so doing, of course, they deny everyone else the opportunity for constructive discussion of policies which would address the environment, poverty and population growth together rather than in isolation.
But among those who heard Prince Charles speak were those who feel they've already put population growth at the top of their agendas.
China has been able to reduce its fertility rate and its rate of population growth. Next is India. It's also capable to reduce population growth, and next Indonesia. So the three countries already responsible for the greatest portion of the population of the world, specifically developing countries. And all have reduced the population growth with an active family planning, yet still, with an increase of development, it goes faster down.
Population programs have indeed played their part in the development of countries like China, but they've been highly controversial. In 1979, China's population was growing at 20 million a year, so it introduced a policy of one child per family, but at a cost. Payments were made to families who kept to the quota, and women who defied it were forced to have abortions.
People are not machines. They follow their own interests by and large. If you try to impose family size limits on them, they will try to get around the regulations. You know, they will have children clandestinely and so on. The only free society that has tried to do that is India in the mid-1970s. And in 1 year they managed to do 8 million sterilizations. But a lot of those were compulsory, and there were a lot of abuses in bringing those about. Family planning became a dirty word in India for 10 years, and India made very little progress until that episode was forgotten.
But without effective family planning programs, the future for the environment looks grim. The more people there are, the greater the demand for land. One estimate says that the population growth has been responsible for almost 80% of deforestation in developing countries, as land is cleared for new farms and houses. The effect of population growth on wildlife has been devastating in developing countries. The least densely populated fifth still have 59% of their habitats intact. In the most densely populated fifth, only 15% of their wildlife habitats remain. And as populations grow, their ability to pollute will also grow. In terms of carbon dioxide emissions, the industrialized countries have been the worst offenders so far. In 1985, they produced 3.8 billion tons of carbon a year, almost 3 times that of developing countries. By the year 2025, the industrialized countries' emissions will have stabilized at about 6.95 billion tons. But the developing world will be catching up, producing more than 5.5 billion tons a year. If poor countries are to develop green industries, though, they'll be asking for far more investment from the West than they've received up to now.
The North has lived mostly on the resources of the South and still does. So it's, again, a vision that we must change together. On the other hand, aid has been mostly bilateral and given to governments. And we know that, for example, since the first time the Commission met 9 years ago, growth has existed. But funny enough, we have more poor people and more illiterate people.
new money is certainly needed. Paul Harrison, whose new book, The Third Revolution, will be the basis for a UN report on population due out next week, says that for aid to reduce the population and help the environment, there are more important priorities than plain economic growth.
Education is the precondition for both bringing birth rates down and for healthy economic development. Because if you look at the Asian countries that are now, becoming industrial powerhouses, they've all got very high levels of education, and they've got very high levels of education for women. And this has brought their birth rates down, and at the same time it's made them attractive to foreign investors.
But as the Commission on the Environment prepared its report for the Rio Summit today, it was clear that some countries still have religious or cultural objections to education about family planning, when that encourages the use of contraception. Those tensions appear in the text which will go to Rio. An earlier draft recommended a programme to provide universal access to family planning, but the final watered-down text suggests a programme to enable women and men to fulfil their personal aspirations in terms of family size. Family planning groups have been alarmed by the change. Sensitivities about birth control can't be ignored by those preparing for the Rio Summit. But the hope is that some poor countries who have hitherto avoided the issue will now openly discuss it.
The Commission must, in its statement now, here in London, refocus on the reality of the links between poverty and population and environment and development, which is the name of the Rio conference. And if we don't address that, and if the rich countries do not come forward to try to alleviate poverty, help doing that, then we cannot fight population increases, which are much more than the Earth can take.
If today's efforts to focus attention on the population crisis fail, the Rio Summit could turn out to be an irrelevance, and the world could still be set for disaster.